I was bored with my marriage of convenience, so I cheated on him, but he took brutal revenge.
My name is Ava and I am 31 years old. I have been married to Brian for the past 6 years. Brian used to work for my father's legal firm. He was a junior intern and slowly worked his way up to become a junior partner in the firm. I met him at one of my father's office parties, and although I did not like him immediately, we slowly grew close and eventually got married when both my parents met with a car accident and died. I was 25 years old then. I have a kid sister, Mia, who is 15 years younger to me. She was an unplanned child and my parents decided to keep the baby. I am very grateful to my parents for this decision as Mia was the best thing that ever happened to me. She means everything to me and I have taken care of her right from the day she was born. I have always thought of her more as my baby than my sister and I love her a lot. We were once a happy family until the news of my parents' accident reached us. I rushed to the hospital with Mia, who was still half asleep. After a few hours, they were declared dead and our entire world shattered around us. Brian came to the hospital and took over the paperwork and everything there was to. He would stay with us at home and make sure that we were fed and helped us to move on with our lives. It was a very difficult phase for us, especially since Mia was only 12 then. It was hard for her to accept the fact that she would have to grow up alone without our parents around. After a few weeks, I started going to the office to manage the firm, but I never showed any interest in it. It was Dad who took care of everything and I had no idea how things worked. Brian helped me in dealing with things at work, but it was all too complicated for me. I missed Dad a lot and could not focus on work. I requested Brian to take care of everything as I couldn't leave me alone for too long. Brian understood my situation and assured me that he would handle everything at the office. He recognized the importance of family and was willing to support me during this difficult time. With his help, I felt a sense of relief knowing that I could rely on him while I focused on being there for Mia. Brian had taken over my dad's firm and organized it very well after all the initial chaos after his death. I was grateful to him for it. I had seen a different side of him which was more responsible, which really fascinated me. I think this quality of his started attracting me towards him. He not only took over the company successfully but also took very good care of me and Mia as if we were his own family. Mia always looked forward to spending time with him. She asked me one day if Brian could stay with us. It would be the best thing for her as she would get to see him every day. This made me start thinking if there was some way I could make this happen. I knew that marriage was not something I could propose to Brian, as it would be absurd to get married to him just for the sake of Mia. I did not even feel romantically interested in him. As the days went by, he would come home often and spend time with Mia. We started spending time like a family and soon I realized that it was not a bad idea to actually get married to Brian. One day, after Mia slept, I spoke to Brian and asked him if he had any romantic interests in his life. He found it quite weird but soon understood what I was getting at. He replied he did not have anyone special in his life. This is how our relationship started. We did not have a very romantic, fairy tale kind of a love story, but we made do with each other. Very soon, we both accepted that this is something which was best for the both of us. Mia was very happy when we broke the news to her of us getting married. It was mostly a marriage of convenience. It was a week since we got married, but I never felt there was any change in mine or Brian's behavior towards each other. The only good thing was that Mia was very happy to spend time with Brian and would always be excited to have breakfast with the both of us. My marriage had always been dull and boring from the beginning. Brian became the lawful owner of my dad's firm and I became a full-time homemaker. My life got so monotonous after getting married that within weeks I felt that it was a mistake marrying Brian. He was very good with Mia, but his equation with me was meh. To sum it up in one word, we would only talk when required and mostly about work and Mia. It felt like we had nothing else to talk about. I started feeling suffocated and wanted to be loved. I wasn't getting that from Brian, that was for sure. I began longing for the passion and affection that seemed to be missing from our relationship. The lack of emotional connection left me questioning if I had made the right decision in marrying Brian. The firm was doing well after a long time, thanks to Brian for his management skills. He hired a personal assistant for himself, which I felt was a bit much, but obviously I did not mention that in front of him. He treated his personal assistant more like a handyman than an assistant. He would make him do all kinds of jobs, which were not even a part of his job. He would make him pick Mia from school, get Brian's coffee or his laundry from the dry cleaners, and sometimes even drop me off somewhere to shop. I felt a little bad for the assistant, thinking he must have been so happy when he got the job, but he would be regretting the job now, as he was doing nothing more than driving everyone around. The personal assistant's job description seemed to have been blurred, as he was constantly being tasked with errands and chauffeur duties. It was evident that his skills were being underutilized, leaving him feeling undervalued in his role. One day Brian's assistant was supposed to drive me to a store. I started a conversation with him. He told me that his name was Alex and this was his first job. No wonder he agreed to anything and everything that Brian would ask him to do. I could clearly see that Brian was taking advantage of Alex needing the job and making him do things that were not even a part of his contract. He was a young and naive guy who was optimistic about everything in life. I felt nice after talking to him. He dropped me off at the store and offered to pick me up once I was done. We continued our conversation, and there was something about him that was very charming that I never wanted this conversation to end. As days went by, I looked forward to my interactions with Alex. He had a positive attitude, and that inspired me to get out of my monotonous life and experience new things. He became friends with Mia as well as Alex would help Mia with her homework and assignments. Their friendship grew stronger as they spent more and more time together, and Alex's willingness to assist Mia with her schoolwork only deepened their bond. Despite the age difference, they found common ground and enjoyed each other's company, making their interactions all the more meaningful. It had been 2 years since Brian had taken over with the company. The office had practically become his second home. Brian would spend most of his time in the office making sure that everything was well organized and things were happening at the pace that he wanted. I could see a shift in his attitude where he had become more and more of a tyrant, making sure that his orders were followed without any questions. Whenever I went to the office, I could sense an air of intimidation around him. I had talked to him about the way he was managing things, and I asked him if he could be a little humble and polite with the people working for us. He gave me a smile and told me that I knew nothing about managing a company, so it would be better if I kept my advice to myself. He was doing a very good job at running the company, and he did all of that without my advice and would probably be doing that going forward even without taking my advice. I felt a little bit of anger and disappointment because first of all it was never his company, it was my dad's, and maybe I knew nothing about running a company, but I sure knew how to treat people. The way he treated people was not something my dad would be happy with either. Secondly, I was still the chairman with the maximum number of shares, so I could throw him out anytime I wanted. In these 2 years, Alex's job role had shifted from being a brilliant personal assistant to mostly driving me around. Alex would accompany me everywhere I went, and I thought of taking him along with me instead of asking him to wait for me in the car. We spent most of the time together, which led to me thinking, what if I had not been married to Brian, then maybe something could have happened between me and Alex. Every day when I was with Alex this thought crossed my mind, and one day out of the blue I couldn't stop myself and kissed him. I could see the shock on his face when he realized what I did. I told him that I was sorry for my behavior and it wouldn't happen again. I don't know what I was thinking. It was awkward between me and Alex for some time, but then we forgot about the kiss and continued our conversation. We were in the parking lot of a supermarket one day and were about to leave for home when I slipped and fell down. Alex picked me up and helped me get in the car. He was so close to my face that I couldn't resist myself. I kissed him and he kissed me back. We made out in the back seat of the car. After 10 minutes I realized where we were and what we were doing. I cleared my throat and told Alex that all this was a mistake. He himself felt very sorry for what happened and started driving. There was silence in the car on the way back home. I ran inside and lied down on the bed. I couldn't stop thinking about how effortless it was for me to be so close to Alex. He made me smile, he spoke to me and listened to me. This is what I wanted from Brian, but never understood this. Alex made me feel special and loved. After today, whenever we had a chance, I and Alex would make out, be at the car, my room, even in the bathroom at times. It was thrilling and exciting to sneak out of a party and make out with Alex. Alex was not that good at sex, but was ready to learn and experiment. We would do role plays when we had enough time. I loved this life of mine. Brian would always be engrossed in work, hardly making any time for me, so it was easy to blame him for his absence. However, deep down, I knew that my actions were driven by a desire for attention and affection. Despite the thrill of sneaking around, I couldn't help but feel a sense of emptiness in my relationship with Brian. I longed for a connection that went beyond physical intimacy and yearned for someone who would prioritize me emotionally. My encounters with Alex were turning out to be more and more wild and romantic. This was causing me to distance myself from both Brian and Mia. I found myself caught up in the whirlwind of passion and excitement that Alex brought into my life. The intensity of our connection made it difficult for me to focus on anything or anyone else, leaving Brian and Mia feeling like distant memories in comparison. This led to more and more arguments between me and Brian whenever we had any conversation. Brian had recently brought in a new rule in the company which I was not in favor of. I asked Brian the same when he was getting ready for work. We were having an argument about Brian forgetting that this company belonged to my father. He was just a caretaker and Mia and I were the original owners of the company. He just had that power of attorney to run the company but was not exactly the owner of it, so he better behave himself. I was still the chairman and had every right to make decisions on behalf of the company. He told me that he was the one who had been taking care of this company for the past 5 years after my father passed away without any issues and major setbacks. He had every right over the company just the way I did. I told him that he had no rights on the company or over me, and just like he never owned the company, he never owned me as well. He told me that I was his wife and he had every right over me. I told him that he never had rights over me or my body, and I would keep pleasing my body with Alex the way I had been doing all these years. Brian looked at me in disbelief as he was unable to make sense of what he was hearing. I realized what I had said the moment I saw his expression and immediately regretted what I had just blurted out without thinking. Oh God, did I just mention my affair to him without realizing it? There was no taking back what I just mentioned. I tried to think of something quickly that I could say to cover up for my blunder. Brian was smart enough to catch up on my lies. He kept asking me to repeat what I just revealed. I told him that I was just angry and did not mean what I said. He immediately called Alex and asked him to come to our home. When Alex came, he asked me to leave them alone. I don't know what went on between them. I was waiting outside, walking up and down nervously. Alex then walked out after a few minutes and, without even giving me a glance, left looking petrified. It was my time to face Brian. I went in hoping for him to scream at me for my affair with Alex. To my surprise, he hugged me and said that it was not my fault. Alex had other intentions and I was so naive to fall for it. He said he fired Alex and would make sure to be there for me. He also said that he was sorry for not being available in my life and giving only work his priority. I was shocked with his behavior as I had not expected this kind of a reaction from him. I decided to play along with his narrative. I saw a big change in Brian after this incident. He started being extra sweet to me and was spending time with me and Mia just like he used to before we got married. I welcomed this change, and maybe this incident had made him change for the better. I made up my mind not to reach Alex and complicate things when finally everything was falling in place. Brian was investing his time in bonding with Mia. They connected very naturally right from the time he walked into our house when Mia was a kid. I was happy to see Mia laugh and smile a lot. I now started seeing Brian as my husband and a father figure for Mia. I did not need anything more. It had been almost 7 months since Brian found out about my affair with Alex. I must say that things have been pretty good since then. We went on a few vacations as a family. We did things that we used to do when my parents were alive. We were slowly making progress as a family, and I loved that all issues between me and Brian had been resolved. Mia had become so fond of Brian that he would pick her up and spend time with her even after her classes. I was not the only person she had to rely on. That was something that gave me a lot of peace. One day when I came back from my spa session, I saw Mia in her room talking over the phone about being scared and not knowing what to do. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but I couldn't help but intrude to know what was going on. I barged in the room and asked her what was wrong. She said that it was nothing that she wanted to discuss with me. I knew something was seriously wrong because Mia would never ever hide things from me and talk to me this way. I decided not to push her and maybe ask Brian to talk to her when he got home. Till the time Brian got home, I kept imagining scenarios of Mia having trouble with a boyfriend that she probably has. I was not even sure if she had a boyfriend. In the past few months, I had been involved very little in her life that I now realized how distant I had become. Was that the reason she was not letting me in on her problems? I waited for Brian to come and told him that there is something wrong with Mia that I was worried about and wanted him to talk to her about it. He smiled and said that it was not a problem and asked Mia to come to our room. She came in and sat nervously at the edge of the bed. Brian walked up to Mia and told me that he had good news to share. He looked at Mia and held her hand and told me that Mia was pregnant. I fell on the ground. How could she do this, and how is this good news? Before I could respond, Brian told me that Mia was pregnant with his baby and it had already been 4 months. I could not register all of this in my brain. I was blank at the thought of Mia being pregnant. She was just 18, and how could Brian have done this to her? She looked up to him as a father figure, and this was how he treated her? I fumbled for words as nothing made sense. Was this a prank? Were they trying to mess with me? I mean, it couldn't be real. There was no way that Mia was pregnant, and that too with Brian's baby. I was very sure that this was a prank and I did not want to fall for it. Mia broke down and started crying, telling me that she was sorry. This was a bit too much and could not be a prank. I looked at Brian and he looked serious. He told me that all this is true and they got really close in the past few months. It all happened too quickly for them to realize what had happened, and when they did it was too late. Brian asked Mia to leave us alone so we could talk and find a solution. Mia was still crying when she left and shut the door behind her. After Mia left, Brian looked at me and sat beside me on the floor. He lifted my face and asked me if I was angry. I did not understand what he meant by angry, and that's when he gave me a wicked smile and told me that this is what I would get if I ever tried to cheat on him. This was my punishment for having an affair behind his back and being proud about it. He told me that he kept thinking about what he could do to make me regret having an affair with Alex. He kept pondering over this question, and then he realized that there were only 2 things that mattered to me in my life. So he formulated a plan to make sure he snatches both the 2 things from me. After we had an argument where I had accidentally spilled out about my affair, he realized that there was no point in him getting angry or screaming at me or demanding for a divorce. He knew that all this would only cause him to lose a lot of things. So he cleverly made me think that my affair was not my fault and I was just manipulated into having an affair. He acted all loving and caring to both me and Mia that we never once doubt his intentions behind the sudden change. All he did was buy time to transfer all the company shares that I and Mia had to him. In the meantime, he started making advances towards Mia in a romantic way and made her feel that he could be more than a friend. Now when I look back, all the vacations that we went on were his way of showing Mia what all he could do to make her happy. Everything he did since he got to know about my affair was to take revenge from me. He made sure that I lost my father's company and also my lovely sister who I could not live without. I must say that he was both cruel and meticulous in carrying out his plan. Not once did I ever get to know his true intentions behind all this. I was so stupid to believe everything he told me and was willing to give him another chance. I did not have the energy to hear any more, so I broke into tears and fainted. I woke up after some time. There was no sign of Brian, so I decided to go to Mia's room and check on her. Her room was locked. I could hear whispers coming from inside. I knocked on the door, and after a minute Brian opened the door. I ignored him and looked at Mia, whose eyes were swollen from all the crying. I called for her and she hid behind Brian. What did he do to my sister that she was scared of me instead of accusing him of doing this to her? I did not know how he manipulated Mia into believing that he would be there for her. I told Mia that I wanted to talk to her alone, but she denied. She said she would be comfortable if Brian was with her when she spoke to me. I could not believe what I was hearing. She was my sister, why would I need Brian to be there when I talked to her? All this was sounding so ridiculous. Brian looked at me and gave me a wicked smile, and I knew there was something that he had told Mia which was not letting her open up to me. I did not give up and tried again and asked Mia if we both could talk alone as sisters. She looked at Brian, probably asking for his approval, to which he nodded. After Brian left, I made sure I locked the door and asked Mia to sit on the bed. I made her comfortable by telling her that I was her elder sister and I was there for her in this difficult time. I told her I was willing to listen to anything that she has to share, and if there was a problem then she could share it with me. She initially hesitated, so I gave her some time to get comfortable. After about 5 minutes of silence, Mia finally spoke. She told me that she was sorry about stealing my husband. She told me that she did not intend for things to turn out this way, but they did because I was the one responsible for all of this. This was something that I wasn't expecting from Mia. She told me that in the last few months she had been observing how hard Brian was trying to keep me happy. But she always saw me being rude to Brian and not respecting him. I wanted to tell her that all this was not true and I didn't know which world she was living in, but I decided to let her continue. She told me that Brian would arrange all these holidays to get closer to me, but I was always busy with my spas and shopping and I did not give him enough time. She felt sad for him and started spending time with him and got to know what an amazing person he was. On one of the holidays, Mia had jokingly told Brian that she wanted to try alcohol. Brian sneaked some alcohol in her room and asked her to taste it. She wanted me to be there when she drank alcohol for the first time, but I did not pick up her calls. This made her sad, but she did not want to neglect Brian's effort, so she tried it and did not like it. Then they fell on the bed laughing, and that was the first time they kissed. They both laughed about it and started tickling each other. And just like that, Brian got on top of her and started kissing her head. She did not understand what was happening at first, but when she did, she was actually enjoying it and didn't want it to stop. They kissed for a few minutes and started undressing each other, but then Brian stopped and told her this was wrong. Mia was the one who wanted to keep going as she was experiencing all this for the first time, so Brian continued, and that is how it all started. She was crying hysterically as she continued talking. She told me that Brian was her first love and he made her feel so special that she could not lose him. He made her feel loved and valued. He made sure he made enough time from his busy schedule to spend time with her. She told me that she felt bad about cheating on me with my husband, but she also knew that both me and Brian were not happy in our marriage. She said that she felt that she was not doing anything wrong and was actually saving us from a bad marriage. She knew that it was wrong to be pregnant with someone else's baby, but she was so much in love with Brian that she was ready to keep the baby. She said that this was all she had to say and she was sorry for everything that would cause me pain, but she does not regret any of it. Listening to Mia talk, my expression changed 1,000 times from being surprised to disgust to plain disbelief. I could not believe that it was Mia I was talking to. All this was happening behind my back for the past few months, and here I was thinking that he was trying to become a family man. I know that at this point there was no use talking to Mia about Brian being an asshole, as there was no way she was going to believe what I had to tell her. I just told her that it was not her fault and that I was not angry or disappointed with her. She was my little sister and she is going to be that for the rest of her life no matter what. I do not want to burden her with all of Brian's lies and manipulations, as she was already going through a lot, so I let her be and asked her to rest. My head was spinning as I made my way to my bedroom. I saw Brian sitting on a chair waiting for me with a smile pasted on his lips. I could tell from his smile that he knew what went down between me and Mia even without being in that room. I just looked at him with disgust in my eyes for what he had done to my sister. He asked me very politely if Mia was okay. I looked at him and said that he shouldn't be bothered about her. He gave me a bunch of papers and asked me to read through them and get back to him if I had any doubts. I was very sure they were divorce papers and I was ready to sign them. I did not want anything to do with this man and wanted him out of my life as soon as possible. I flipped them open and saw that they belonged to the company. He now owned the highest amount of shares in the company that belonged to my father. How could this be possible? Mia and I together held 85% of the shares, so there was no way that he owned 90% of the shares. I looked at the papers in confusion and told him that if these were fake, then I was going to sue him without hesitation. He smiled at me and said they were real. He then handed me the papers where Mia had transferred all of her shares to Brian. My heart sank as I was not ready to accept it. He not only got my sister pregnant but manipulated her into transferring her shares to him. So now he had both my father's company and my sister at his disposal. He could do anything he wanted with either of them, and there was nothing I could do about it. I felt so helpless in this situation. He took back all the papers from me and grinned at me. He told me that I should have respected him when I had the chance and he wouldn't have been so cruel with me. I looked at him with hatred and went to the bathroom. I sat on the floor and could sense my entire world crashing down on me. I knew that there was nothing I could do to protect my company or my sister. It has been a week since the truth about Mia's pregnancy and we losing all our company shares came to light. The last week has been really difficult as I've been trying to find solutions to get our shares back and also to convince Mia to get an abortion. To be honest, I've made no progress at both these things. I feel lost, defeated, and crushed. I have no hope left. My energy keeps draining as it is very difficult to make an 18-year-old understand that the man she has been dreaming about does not exist. It is all a lie and a smokescreen presented to her to make her hate her sister. Brian has such a strong hold on Mia that she would only talk to me after consulting with Brian. It has been very hard for me to keep my anger under control and dealing with Brian in a nice and sophisticated manner. I am writing this post in the hope that someone out there could advise me on how to convince my sister to get an abortion. I don't want her to live her life with the baby of a person who I knew was going to abandon her soon. I am not bothered about the company or the shares at the moment. All I want is for my sister to be safe. I'm begging anyone out there who could give me a solution to save my sister from such a cruel and cunning person. I would highly appreciate any ideas or solutions to save my sister. Thank you all for your patience and for listening to my story and helping me and my sister out. Update. Thank you for all your replies and support. This has given me strength to fight for myself and my sister. I have tried to rebuild my bond with Mia. I am actively working towards building a relationship of trust with Mia so that I could let her see Brian's true face. I know that it is not going to be easy to reason with Mia to stop looking at me like her enemy and to believe what I have to say about Brian. I have come to the conclusion that there was now no point in forcing Mia to abort her baby as it was too risky. I did not mind her keeping the baby, but getting rid of Brian from our lives was a priority. I tried to use some of your ideas to help me get rid of Brian's hold on Mia. Brian came in one day at breakfast and told me that if I was to file for divorce, he had Alex ready to confess about his affair with me. He even had pictures of us together that would help him prove the affair. He told all of this in front of Mia to show her what kind of a wife I had been to Brian. This was just to gain more sympathy from Mia that I was the villain in this marriage. I was the one who cheated on my husband, and even after that he had been too good to me. I could see his cunning and manipulative skills. He kept telling Mia that I was the one not willing to divorce him, and that was the only reason why he could not be with her. Mia, being too young, would believe anything that he told her and gave me a cold shoulder when I tried talking to her in Brian's presence. Once he was sure that Mia was totally in his control, he slammed the divorce papers on my face. We went to court where he made Mia take the stand and admit that I cheated on him. Obviously, I lost the case and had nowhere to go. The house belonged to Mia, which was being transferred to Brian during my divorce trial. Once he had the house under his name, he kicked Mia out of the house. Both Mia and I were homeless and had nowhere to go. I went and begged Brian to let us stay in our house and we would stay put without causing any trouble. I told him that Mia still had his child and I could not take her anywhere in this condition. This was the least he could do for us. He finally agreed after a lot of pleading. Mia is now 7 months pregnant. We are living in our own house as slaves. I see no light at the end of the tunnel for us. The only thing that keeps me going are the messages and good wishes I get from all of you to hang on and never lose hope. Thank you all for everything you have been doing for me and my sister. I would forever be grateful for your kind words that give us hope to live. I will keep you updated if there is something worth updating. hoping to stay alive and positive till then.
Have you ever felt the urge to do something that was always on your mind and let loose? Well, letting yourself go, and you're letting your mind take control without discipline, and do what you've always wanted to do. Well, I had thought I was making myself feel alive again. I wanted to have that feeling that everyone has, a feeling of being free again. I wanted to remind myself that you can also let loose or have fun while you are married. I mean, because most people nowadays, especially women, no longer be themselves when they get married. Some lose themselves to a point that they make marriages look like it's a union to someone's true self. Some end up regretting ever getting married because they would no longer be allowed to do things that had made them happy. They become people they are not, which kills most of our married sisters. It does not feel free when you get married. This took a lot of bravery to share, so I only accept advice and not judgments. I, female, 28, am a happily married woman, married to Simon Goldman, male, 45. We live in a golf country estate that my husband owns. He is a golfer. He is also a real estate investor, and that's how we met. He was purchasing one of my father's buildings, and I was in my father's office when he arrived. It's actually crazy that my father is the one who introduced him to me. Well, I guess I wasn't daddy little girl anymore. I felt like he wanted to get rid of me. We started going out on dates. He was charming and handsome. I also figured out that my father and his father were friends and also have a joint company that was established before I was born. After years of dating, we decided to tie the knot. I was the happiest woman ever. Months went by and I was starting to feel a little bored, especially when my husband is always away on his golf trips, his part of the Golf Nation tournament. I always get tempted to go out clubbing and doing something crazy and let loose just a bit before I reach my 30s. But I always contain myself and not go out at all. I would discipline myself. My temptation ends being a thought. But there was a time when my husband left for a golfing trip. I could resist the urge of going out with my friends from college. I saw that as the perfect opportunity to break free from the monotony of my married life and have a little fun. So I started by cleaning the house and doing some much-needed grocery shopping. But as the day went on, I found myself feeling more and more restless. So I called my girls and asked if their offer of going out was still standing, which they confirmed then. We went to a club a few hours away from our city. It was supposed to be a little girls' night, but things went crazy and wild. We had a couple of drinks, and a couple of guys came to us that when things got hectic. One of the guys approached me and started giving me compliments. He was very charming and a bit handsome, younger than me, probably 25. One of my friends said, "Let's move the party elsewhere." How I wish she didn't say, but I couldn't predict what was about to happen. We went to the Four Seasons Hotel and booked a presidential suite so we can have all the fun without noise complaints, since everything is soundproof. As we were there drinking with the guys, I started to notice that there's 4 of us, and 4 of them, everyone had a partner. I started feeling a little uneasy, as I was the only one married amongst my friends, and they were so chilled, I won't lie, those guys were funny. The guy who was giving me a compliment came to me as I was gazing at the view outside. He introduced himself as Harold Thomas. He had a way of making me feel comfortable. Well, this is when I realized I needed to loosen myself a bit, as I was feeling a bit of guilt. We started to talk about life and conspiracies, and we realized we had something in common, and drinks kept on coming, the music kept on playing, and our conversation kept getting deeper. And I found myself drawn to his charming smile and kind eyes. We fell asleep on the couch cuddling each, and I was grateful that nothing happened to us. At first, I felt a mixture of guilt and excitement that nothing had happened, and I had an opportunity to let loose. I had never done anything like that before, and I wasn't sure if I could ever forgive myself, but nothing happened right. So why feel guilty when nothing has happened? So as the day went on, I found myself losing myself in the moment, and the guilt began to fade away. Our trip came to an end, and I knew that I had to go back to my boring house, plus my husband was coming back, so I had to go. When I got home, I had found my husband already back, which was a shock to me, because I didn't expect him to be back earlier, since I had also tried to be back earlier than him. Well, I guess he had beat the traffic. He asked where I was coming from, so I told him that I had gone to a night away with the girls. But I left the guys' part aside, because if I had mentioned it, hell would have broken loose. The next day, as I was going through the pictures that we had taken during the trip, One of the girls had taken them and put them on Instagram. One picture caught my attention. It was a picture of me and the Harold guy, and it looked too intimate and cozy. I told Miranda, my friend, to take it down because if Simon or any of our relatives were to see that picture, a lot would be ruined. Luckily, she listened and took it out, which was a huge relief. Sometimes my husband and I would spend our weekends together, but it wasn't fun because he would always watch golf games, and I would be sitting with him reading a book, which was purely boring for me. My mind was thinking about the trip that me and the girls had. I had been feeling neglected by my husband for quite some time, even if he was around. He was always busy with work, and his golfing games never seemed to have time for me. I felt like I was just a mere obligation to him, rather than a beloved partner. I won't lie and say the girls' night was boring because it wasn't. It was actually full of life and fun. I enjoyed every moment of it, and I wished I could turn back the hands of time and go back to that night. Months passed, my husband had been too occupied with work and his golfing games. To tell the truth, golf really bores me. There is actually no fun in it. It shows that it's a game for rich people. So one day, a guy from the trip texted me on Instagram. I was so shocked about why he would send me a text on my Instagram. But I didn't ask him anything. I just replied to his messages, which were actually a very good distraction because I was somehow bored at home. So he had asked me to accompany him to his friend's party. I hesitated at first because I didn't know what I would tell my husband. But God came through for me, and I really needed to get some air and let loose a little. I had been cooped up in the house for way too long. The party was going to be on the following day, and my husband had told me that we won't be spending our weekend together because he was going on a golfing trip with his buddies. He even asked if I didn't want to join him on his trip, and I assured him that I would be fine in the house so he can go alone, knowing very well that I had declined his offer for a much better and funnier offer than his. So, when my husband left for his annual golfing trip with his buddies, he gave me a peck on the cheek and told me to have a great weekend. I should take care of myself, and he would see me when he came back. God knows how much I wanted him to leave already, so I would get ready for the day ahead. So I smiled and nodded, but as soon as the door closed behind him, I let out a sigh of relief. I had been itching to let loose and have some fun, but I didn't want to do anything that would jeopardize our marriage. So that weekend was a great opportunity for me to let loose a little. As soon as my husband was gone, I decided to take advantage of the situation. I put on my favorite dress, did my hair and makeup, and waited for Harold to come and fetch me because that was the plan. When we got there, I felt the vibe already. There were so many people. I guess it was friends and maybe colleagues. I spotted his friends that I had met during that girls' night. They were with their partners who were very much friendly and full of fun. The music was blasting, everyone was having their good time, minding their own business, and that was what I really needed. It felt so liberating to be able to be myself without worrying about what my husband would think. The next day, I woke up feeling a bit hungover and regretful. I had a bit too much to drink the night before, and I was worried that my husband would notice when he got back. But as I looked in the mirror, I saw a confident and carefree version of myself staring back. I realized that I didn't need to be perfect all the time, and that it was okay to let loose and have fun. Over the next few days, I continued to explore my newfound freedom whenever my husband was either at work or went golfing. I continued chatting and going out with Harold. He made me feel so much alive, as he also introduced me to new clubs around New Jersey. I knew from there that I had found my real self. I had finally found the person I had always wanted to be. Yes, my friends and I would go out, but they respected my husband, so they didn't want to be on his bad books. My friends treat Simon like he was a god or something. Sometimes I would think they were fooling him or me to think that they respected my marriage. I once told my husband that we should sometimes go out as a couple and have fun, just to let loose and find our groove back, because before we got married, we would go out maybe 2 weekends a month, then we would come back and focus on our jobs. But when we got married, he changed to be the person I didn't know and didn't like, because he was boring. He was all about golfing, even if we were spending time together. He would talk about his golfing games and his buddies. Harold, on the other hand, was unleashing the person that I was. He was so wild to a point that he would sometimes call me and say, "Let's go out." Or he was at the gate. He was waiting for me so we could go out when my husband was even around. So I would have to turn him down, When he did that, once I understood and told him to call in advance before driving all the way to where I was staying, even when my husband was in the house. I had set boundaries earlier, but the guy continued doing things his way. I even told him that I was going to cut off the friendship we had if he continued doing what he was doing. He was acting like a crazy, obsessed, and possessed person, and I couldn't let him ruin my marriage. As time passed, Simon had started going out a lot, spending less time with me. I also spent a lot of time with Harold. What I loved about him was that he was so adventurous, full of life. I would say he was an extrovert. I always enjoyed spending time with him because as much as he was an outgoing person, he knew what he wanted. He was working as an IT technician, well, more like he was working for himself. The more I was hanging out with Harold, the more I got to know him on a much deeper level. And I found out that we actually had a lot in common. Our energies clicked, you know. With Simon, it was always about his work and golfing. Sometimes I would feel regretful on why I got married to him, but remember that my dad actually introduced me to him. I had met Simon at my father's office. We talked here and there, but to tell the truth, my father kept pressuring me into spending more time with Simon. So I did as told, and we got along very well. So the more I learned about him, his gentleness, care, and passion to be the best golfer and get to be on Tiger Woods' level, drew me more to him. Since I was an interior designer, our jobs clicked, you know? Then I fell in love with him. I don't know how, but I found myself head over heels with him. We got married. Our families were happy for us. Well, more like our fathers were happy. We were also happy because we had chemistry. A deeper one. His golfing games would be in different places, so I would sometimes go with him, just to give him some support and cheer on him. But as time went by, I realized that golf games were actually not my cup of tea. It was not the kind of game that I would give myself time to watch and enjoy. I just didn't understand it because my father would also go out to play golf with his associates, but it wasn't the sport he would focus on and want to be the best in it. I believed that golfing was for business people discussing business matters while passing time by playing golf. But to Simon, it was a hobby, a career, and something he loved. So you see why Simon and I didn't work out. But on Harold's side, he understood me and what I wanted. He knew exactly what my soul needed, and it lacked some fun and life, and he gave me what I needed. My friends started complaining about the way I was spending more time with Harold and would ask if I was sleeping with him, which came as a shock because I never thought they would think so low about me, that they would actually think that I would cheat on Simon. Yes, I was spending a lot of time with Harold, but I loved Simon and I respected our marriage so much. One happy morning, well, I woke up happy and in a great mood that weekend. Simon and I had a very steamy and loving, intimate moment the previous night. We had a lot of lovemaking. So I decided to wake up early to prepare a nice breakfast for my husband, so we would get ready for the day. As we had planned to go out together to pamper ourselves and try to bring back the spark that we once had before we got married. I had planned everything, you know. I was so happy that I was going to spend time with my husband after a long time of him always going out. So that morning, he came down the stairs wearing his golfing clothes and came down with his kit. I didn't understand why he was wearing that, so I asked why he was wearing his golfing clothes while we had plans for the day. He just gave me a very lousy excuse and told me that his golf buddies had texted him and told him about the game that was taking place on the very same day that was supposed to be our day. My mood just instantly went down the drain. I was so angry at him, but I was also angry at myself for thinking that Simon was actually going to choose me for one, and not his golfing games or his buddies. I mean, why would someone promise to spend time with you and even reassure you that the day was only for us, and we were going to switch off our phone so that we would not get any disturbances? But his big head switched on his phone and got his buddy's message about a certain game that was taking place just when we had planned something else. I just didn't say anything. I was so heartbroken and shattered because it was obvious that his friends and golfing games were much more important than spending time with his wife. I started hating his friends. I hated his love for golf because it was always finding its way to get Simon's attention and forget about me. It was like I was a non-factor to him. I was not important at all, and that really crushed me to a point that I decided to just do me and do what made me happy. That I drank myself to sleep because Harold was also busy with his own things, so I just closed myself indoors and drank my sorrows away. I stopped going to work because of the tension that was in the house. I was taking it with me to work to a point, that I wouldn't focus on some details and end up making mistakes. I lost 2 clients that had wanted to renovate their house inside, and I did the exact opposite of what they had wanted and ordered. I was under a lot of pressure. I was still angry at Simon, as much as he had tried to apologize, but I didn't buy his lame apology, so we lived as housemates. How can a person apologize for doing you wrong or for not keeping their promise that they had made to you, but still not change the way they act? We say actions speak louder than words, but with Simon it was more like words spoke louder than his acts, because his actions were way too opposite than what he was saying about making it up to me for ditching me at the last minute. I hate people who make promises, then end up doing a completely different thing and not keeping their promises. Pity, I couldn't even cry to my father or my mother because they had high hopes for my marriage with Simon, and they had trusted Simon a lot, to a point that if I was to tell them what was going on in my marriage, they would disagree with me and paint him as a saint. Weeks passed. I had gone back to my old self. I was going out a lot and having fun. It was useless of me to keep believing and hoping that Simon was going to change, because he was a naturally boring and serious person. The only time we would go out is when we go with his friends and their partners, or I would drag him to go out with me on my birthdays. He was too focused on his work and his golfing and never his wife. So I would go out to different clubs every day since I had taken some time off at work to recover from what was going on. As I was going out, Simon asked to speak with me about my sudden behavior. He told me that he didn't know that I was a wild person and I was hanging out with bad boys. He started shouting at me, but I still continued going out, especially with Harold, despite his disapproval. But as I was having more fun and letting loose, Harold asked me to accompany him to another party at his friend's house, so I agreed with him, then we went. As we arrived, the party was lit. He introduced me to his other friends that I didn't know, and they were so much fun and full of life, so we danced till we dropped. Later on, when I felt tired, I told Harold that I was tired. Luckily, on that weekend, Simon had gone to France for his golfing trip with his buddies, so he wouldn't see that I had gone out. Anyway, Harold took me to this room, which I think was a guest room, mind you, that time I was sloshed. I had drank a lot and danced a lot, but I still remembered what had happened that night. I remember Harold saying something to me as we reached the bedroom. I didn't remember the exact words he was saying because we were both out of it. So he said what he said. All I remember him saying was that he had always had a love crush on me and he wished to kiss me. My drunk mind didn't even think of the consequences and outcomes of my actions, so I kissed Harold. Well, more like he kissed me, and I actually enjoyed it. As we continued kissing, things escalated to another level, to a point that I found myself lost in the moment. I slept with him, and I saw that in the morning when I woke up at him cuddling me like I was his teddy bear. Even my Nana confirmed that I had committed adultery and went against my wedding vows. That morning, I woke up feeling guilty and confused. I had cheated on my husband, something I never thought I would do. I didn't know if I could forgive myself, let alone my husband, if he were to find out. Regret came to me like a flood. I regretted even agreeing to come to the party with Harold. I was scared that if Simon was to find out, a lot would be ruined and my marriage would be in jeopardy. I loved my husband, and I didn't want to lose him over some fun and letting loose that I had needed. Well, I had thought I needed. Days later, Harold texted me and asked to meet up so we could talk about ourselves. I completely and bluntly refused to see him. I wanted nothing to do with him. I hated myself for what I had done to Simon and our marriage, but I hated Harold more. It was more like he had taken advantage of my intoxicated and vulnerable self. So when I declined his request for a meeting, he started calling me names and swearing at me. He even called me a harlot and threatened to leak our sex tape on social media so that I would see what my husband and my family would say. I continued declining his request and thought the crazy man was actually joking. But I believed him when he sent me the video of us enjoying the intimate moment at his friend's house. When I saw the video, I started panicking and somehow agreed to meet with him because I had no choice. If the lunatic called Harold were to leak the video, my reputation, my marriage, my job, and everything would go down the drain. It would get destroyed, not to mention how disappointed my family, especially my parents, would be. I had messed it up, and I had no one to blame but myself, and only myself. It was not like he had forced himself on me. We were both intoxicated, and I slept with him willingly. I was scared. I won't lie. Months later, Simon had gone to another golfing trip, and the Harold guy was still blackmailing me into meeting with him, or he would release the disgusting and humiliating video. I knew I had to find a way to deal with the issue that I was facing. So as the days went by, Simon was still not back. I started to miss my husband. I missed the way he made me laugh, the way he held my hand, and the way he always knew how to make me feel better. I realized that I didn't need to let loose and have fun at the expense of my relationship. But I did anyway, and there is no way to undo it. When my husband finally returned from his trip, I was nervous about how he would react to my newfound independence. I knew I had done him wrong, but I had to come clean to him and tell him what had been happening, but I would leave the intimate moment that I had with Harold on the side. And I won't even mention that I was spending time with him because he warned me to stop going out with Harold, the time he found out that I was going to clubs with him. So I told him what I thought he wanted to hear and told him my desires of letting loose and exploring new places. I had thought he was going to act irrational or angry because I knew my husband. He always wanted perfection, and what I told him was not what he liked, but to my surprise, he was happy to see me and embrace the changes he saw in me. He told me that he had missed me too, and that he was proud of me for being true to myself. I was so relieved that he was not angry or anything, but he understood my concerns and desires. The way he responded made me fall much harder for him and regret ever allowing myself to go out with Harold. From that day on, our relationship was different. We were both more open and honest with each other, and we made an effort to prioritize our relationship and have more fun together. I learned that it was okay to let loose and be myself, but that it was also important to respect and prioritize my relationship. So from there, Simon started changing for the better. I was happy, we were happy, and everyone was happy. We had even decided to attend couples therapy because we thought our issues were not only the ones we saw on the outside, but they were inside our heart and soul. So as we were attending a couples therapy sessions, I was glad that Simon finally realized that he also had an impact on what had been going on and why I somehow found myself letting loose. He realized that he had been so caught up in his career and golfing to a point that he had neglected his wife. I was really happy with the progress of our marriage, and the therapy session did help a lot, though I still hadn't come clean about what had happened between me and Harold. While on the other hand, Harold continued threatening me and my marriage. But I would tell myself that he was just a dog that only barks but cannot bite. About 2 months later, my relationship with my husband was on another glorious level. I had also started attending his golf trips also, so that when he was done playing, we would then go out and have fun and let loose with him. It's great fun to let loose with your partner because you get to do anything that makes the two of you happy and satisfied. I realized that if I had spoken out earlier or even included the parents, what happened between me and Harold wouldn't have happened. But we can't change the past, right? Time passed, well, sunny and good morning. I woke up early to prepare for the family gathering that was going to be in our house. It was like a tradition that we usually do twice a year, in different households, so that day it is going to be in our house. My husband also woke up in a very jolly mood. He helped me prepare and set everything. We had our breakfast over silly and light conversation before we went to take a bath together. I loved those moments. We made a lot of lovemaking and we were in a very good space. I loved it, and it was really refreshing, not knowing what would happen later on. So the families came to both mine and Simon's. I was really happy and surprised that even the relatives that we had last seen a long time ago were actually present. I thought it was a blessed and best day until things went downhill as we were all chilling and laughing. I had even forgotten about Harold, but he had to avail himself in a most criminating and humiliating way. I would never forgive myself or Harold for ruining my life and my marriage. So as we were having a good time playing board games with the families, Simon came to the living room looking like he was ready to kill. His face and body language was full of rage. I couldn't even think that he might have found out about my abomination. So he looked at me with eyes full of rage, hurt, and disappointment. He asked to speak with me on the side. Without thinking about what would have made him so angry, I followed him to our bedroom. When we got there, he threw a phone at me. I got confused about why he would throw a phone at me, so I looked at him hoping to get the answer I had been asking myself. Instead, he told me to press play on the video that was posted on Twitter. so I did as told without thinking again because I wanted to see what had made my husband angry. When I pressed play, I got the shock of my life. Harold had posted a video of him and me making out at his friend's house. Worst part, the video was even trending. I was trembling and shaking. I was lost for words. I couldn't even utter the apology because I didn't know what was there to apologize for. As I looked at the comments, someone had posted a picture that was taken by Miranda, my friend, on a girls' night out, when and where I first met with Harold, plus the picture of me sleeping with Harold in that hotel room that we had gone to. I knew there and then that my marriage was completely over and dusted, and there was nothing I would do or say that would make it survive. I knew that the picture that was posted on the comment section was posted by someone who had taken them, and that would be only one person. My so-called friend Miranda, plus she was the only one who had a problem with me hanging out a lot with Harold. I tried explaining what had happened, but Simon didn't want to hear anything, the way he was furious. I knew that if he was an aggressive person, he would have murdered me on the spot. As I was rambling, trying to apologize and explain, he dropped a very huge and unexpected slap on my face. I got so shocked and I went to the living room, trying to run away from the furious Simon. But when I got there, the first eyes I saw that would haunt me forever were my mom's and my mother-in-law's eyes. They were looking at me like I was the most disgusting thing. My father was more disappointed than angry. Simon came down the stairs with my luggage and told my parents that he didn't want me in his house anymore, and I should expect divorce papers soon. My mother just said she didn't want a witch in her house because I would influence my young siblings to perform abominations and humiliate the family name like I did. Her words broke my heart, but I couldn't put blame on anyone because I had brought shame and humiliation upon myself. Months passed. I had been drowning myself in alcohol because of the depressing stage I was in. I had lost my husband, my family, my friends, my image and reputation was tainted. I would always drink and cry myself to sleep every day, regretting everything that I had done. I would question myself and ask where I had gone wrong and what wrong did I do besides sleeping with Harold. My only fault was allowing Harold to manipulate me and lead me to bed with him, only for him to humiliate me like that because he had started being obsessive over me, and I didn't allow him. While on the other side, the person I had called a friend and thought she had my back no matter what had turned on me and ganged up with my enemies. But I couldn't blame any of them because at the end of the day, I was the one who was married, and I was the one who should have made sure that I didn't do anything to taint my image or destroy my marriage. But I did the complete opposite, all in the name of I wanted to feel free and let loose. There was no time to cry over a spilled milk anymore, so I had to try to get up, dust myself off, and move on. As much as it was not going to bring back what I had lost, but I had to bring back myself. So I attended AA meetings because of the alcohol abuse, while talking to my therapist about what was happening, and she helped me a lot in picking up the pieces that were scattered in my life. About a couple of months later, I was back on my feet again. I continued with what I loved doing, which was exploring new places and focusing on my job as an interior designer. The only difference was that I was no longer working for someone else's company but myself. I knew there and then that happiness is found within yourself, and you create your own happiness without going out and doing things that you would regret later. I also learned that everyone was born alone, so you shouldn't try and find happiness or validation elsewhere. You only have yourself in this world and no one else. But I learned that the hard way, but I'm grateful for the lessons I have learned. This took a lot for me to share. I am not proud of it, but I am proud of the woman I had become. Please advise me on how I should have tried to avoid everything from happening and how to deal with temptations when they come. No judgments, please, only guides and advice.